Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at how you can create dynamic elements inside of virtual sets, effectively virtual individual components that you can use to augment the virtual sets that you may be using. So before we get into that, I want to invite everybody, please, if you have any questions, have any comments, just post them in the comments on whatever platform you're looking at, and we will try to get to any questions here live on air. Also, if you would like to join us, please, we have a phone-in, basically a web connection through live to air that you can join us through. So if you'd like to be on air live with us, somebody from the studio will get you on. So let me talk a little bit about what we would like to do today. So what we've put together using sort of elements inside of VMix is a way to create a virtual projector inside of a VMix virtual set that will show video sort of floating in the air, semi-transparent, with all the elements around it to try to make it more believable. So since that's harder to describe than anything else, let me just show you exactly what it is we're looking at here, and then we can go from there. So this is a virtual set I put together, and we'll be using that for the session today. And so what I'm looking to do is the ability to take and bring a guest. Let me sort of switch over here. So I'd like to be able to take and bring a remote guest or participant or comments to bring them on air, sort of with the sense that this is being just projected in the air. And then when we're done, the ability to just take and switch that off air and have that go away. So we're going to go over exactly how we did that inside of the virtual set framework in VMix. But before I dive into that, we actually have a lot of comments that have come in. So let me get to that and say hi. So Spatial Optic, hi, hooray. It's always good to see you, Spatial. Thank you for joining us here. So we have Stream Virtual saying hello, Stream Virtual. Thank you for joining. Let's see, who else do we have here? Let's see. Okay, so we have Tom from Eastern Shore Broadcasting, Tom Sinclair, waiting with bated breath. So thank you, Tom. Always good to see you here. So we have Samuel Nordvik from Norway. Thank you for joining us, Samuel. Who else do we have? We have John Simon. Yes, this is, hopefully everybody finds this interesting. We thought this, might be a nice variation on some of the things we've been doing recently. So thank you, John. Let's see, we have Peter from good old Germany. Peter, thank you for joining us here. Let's see, we have Michael Quist from Copenhagen. Thank you, Michael, for joining. Good to see you again. We have Marco Fabri. Marco, thanks for joining. Good to see you again. And let's see, who else do we have? And American Newscape. Looking forward to having you here. Thanks, America. Okay, so the first thing to do is let me actually go over where this will start. And that is, it all starts with the virtual set that we have set up. And I have in Photoshop, over here on my left screen, I have the layers that I use to build out this virtual set. So I figure I'll start here, and then we can work through everything that we're going to do. So if I take these layers off, so let me sort of just switch these off. Everything starts with a background. So in this case, I just have a very basic background here, sort of a screen with sides. So it's a very basic set I put together using Lightwave. But one of the things you'll notice is that I have this element here sitting on the floor. So it gives me something that I can use in the virtual set to sort of build off of to add the additional elements for the screen. So how do we display this screen element? Well, we actually have, and I don't have it here in this Photoshop, we have two backgrounds. One background has just this plain bar going along here. The second background actually has sort of a glow. We added a light in the 3D modeling program with a lens flare on the bottom to give that sense that something just lit up. And what lit up? We have this layer here, which actually has sort of wavy lines that are going across it that show like a light projector that's going up in a flat vertical space. And so that's what we use this. What you see here, even though it's sort of this weird color, is called a UV gradient. And I'll explain that in a minute, but it's a way to map image assets, video or still images, into a specific space in 3 dimensions, sort of like depth as well as distortion and side to side. So you get to map something into a virtual space. The next thing we have is the actual video that we're going to show inside this. And so if I click over here, you'll now see I have another layer on top of that. So I'm stacking these these UV maps to create sort of that virtual sense of the video with lights shining up the back and then the video on top of it. One of the things you'll notice, I'm not sure you can see it, but over here, all of these layers have different levels of opacity, transparency in here. So this allows me, if I go to the layer under it, that is, basically only 40% through. So you sort of see these lights and the movement without it being a real block on the visual. And for the guest, we're at 75%. So, you can see like 25% transparency to see back behind that. So you can even see here, you can see a bit of this wall, this paneled wall behind it. And then the last element we have is for the talent, which we just sort of stick in the middle of the set and we build out from there. So that really is how we built this out, as all these different layers. Now, inside of VMix, we'll assemble them into a VMix recognized virtual set, which I'll talk about in a moment. But what I really wanted to talk about first was a little bit about this element right here. What is a UV map? So the way to think of it is it's an RGB-based coordinate system. So each pixel inside this image has a red, a blue, a red, a blue, and a green, a red, a green, and a blue pixel count. And that pixel has an intensity. So how much red, how much green, how much blue. So if you think about this as an image, each one of these pixels can actually have 3 dimensions in a coordinate. So an R dimension, a G dimension, and a B dimension. In gradient maps, they only use 2. They use the R and the G. And the way this works is that you start from 0 up to 65,000. So it's a 16-bit space you're working in, which is one of the reasons why when you see people talk about building virtual sets, they always talk about building them in either 16-bit or 32-bit color space, because you need those additional bits in the color space to act as coordinates. So across this top row, we have sort of green as 0, and red goes from 0 up to 65,000. And then each additional row below that has green incrementing by 1. So all the way at this end, it's a 65,000 by 65,000 for red and green. In all of these cases, blue is 0. It doesn't matter. It's not looked at for the gradient. But you can see from here now, if I bend this or I cut it out or do anything else to it, I know in a sort of a coordinate matrix exactly where I cut out or where I warped it or bent it. And that allows me to do all types of transforms. So if you look over here, when I am looking at these elements that I put in here, these are actually sort of sliced sideways, sort of at a projection backwards. And, I actually can even crop them. And that will mean that whatever image I put there will conform to that shape and that crop. So hopefully that was helpful. So as I mentioned, in doing this, we used 2 virtual sets. So for this, let me switch over to the VMix screen over here. And this will hopefully be helpful. So if you look across the top, these are the 2 virtual sets that I used. They're identical except for the backdrop. And if you look here in this element, this is the lens flare. You can see that I have a little bar going across there in the at the base here. And this is the projector on set. So that means when I have a guest, I have that projector on. And the first thing you have in this set is you have this light element that I have. So if you, I'll just play it here so you can sort of see it. Let me slide over here. So you can see that's the lights, and they sort of just move back and forth inside of that element. And it's semi-transparent, so you can see everything behind it still. So you have that sense of it sits in that space. It's not just cutting out, itself from the space. So that was one of the things that we have with that. And so if you think about how this would work as I move between them, if I fade, what you'll see, and I'll just sort of give you this sense when I fade this here, this seems to start glowing and lighting up over here. And so that gives you that sense that the projector has lit up. And so that's what we're doing with using these 2 virtual sets. So, and when we fade off, you get that same type of feeling, like it shuts off and disappears back into the floor. And that was the lens flare was part of that. That lens flare gives you that sense of that's where it's going down to. So that's the origination point and the closure point. So hopefully this sort of sets it up so we can now dig into more of the technical details around how all of this works. So before I jump into the next phase, we have a few more comments here. So let's see. Stream Virtuals saying, yes, 8-bit, no worky. Absolutely. So, I mean, if you think about it, 8 bits is a 256 resolution. So you're saying I can do 256 dots across by 256 dots down. And that's why when you use sort of an 8-bit resolution gradient, you actually see it just as pixelated. So that's all it's doing. It's taking that image and mapping it into 256 across. So it still works. It just works at a very low resolution. So good point on outlining that Stream Virtual. Thank you. So let's see. So Kevin says, he's late, a few weeks late. I am glad you're busy with work, Kevin. So glad you were able to catch up with us today as well. So thank you. And yeah, absolutely. Experts Who Agency is saying busy is good. Yes, absolutely. So, for all of us, I hope we are all busy at what we do. So, okay. So what I want to look at next is I want to explain, since we sort of broke down the details of the graphics that we're using for this virtual set, I'd like to now look at the XML that we're using here to build this set inside of VMix. So this is your basic VMix XML framework. And the way we have this set up is you can take and have multiple layers in your virtual set. The top layer is the one that's in the back, and then each layer that you add stacks in front of it. So you have to think of it sort of almost like the inverse of Photoshop, where you put the main layer on the bottom and you stack things on top of it. This works the opposite direction as a file. So what we have is we have something called the background, and we're just placing it there. It's X, Y is centered. There's no zoom, no rotate. And so we're just saying this is the background.png file. So was that first layer inside Photoshop. That's what we say that here, and we're telling it use that as your background layer. And then each of these other layers now are sort of stacking up. So we use the projector beam layer, which is that light, waving light that goes behind it. And so again, we just have this placed full on. We're not transforming it on set. Let me see if I slide this over a little bit. I'll do a word wrap. Let's see. All right. So for the projector beam, we're not changing anything. We're saying dynamic equals true, which means I could go in and change it. I have the ability inside of VMix to say, I want to change what feed gets mapped to that. And we do that because it's a UV projector map. And so that projection map. And so we're saying this is the UV map that I want you to use when you put that out there. And then we're just saying, put a blank screen in there for now. So we're defaulting it to nothing, basically. So that gives us a placeholder for whatever we want to add inside of VMix. And we're doing the same thing for what we show on the screen itself. It's another input defined in the XML for describing the virtual set that goes through and says, use the UV map, screen UV.png. So that's a different UV map. Those two that we had stacked on top of each other. This is the front one, which will show the guest. And then finally, we have the talent, which is the big UV map that we had sitting there. And this gives us the place that we stick the guest. The guest is green screened, obviously, and we'll get to that. So that's everything to describe the set. And then inside the set, you can have 4 predefined positions. So the sort of close-up, medium, full, and custom. You can name these anything you want. You can set the coordinates and the zoom and the rotate any way you want. That's all in there. But that just gives you an easy way to switch between any one of those 4 positions when you're in the virtual set. So that can be very useful. And you can see this is just a standard XML file like we've used in the past. It starts with an open virtual set and does the closed virtual set. And all of these are just either inputs or zooms, which is how far in or out do I want to go on the set to do the transformation. So that is the XML that defines the sets. The only difference between the 2 sets is we have a different background. For one set, we have the background that's plain with just the black bar, and the other we have it where there's a glow on the top of the black bar with a lens flare in front of it. But otherwise, the 2 sets are identical. So let's now actually dig into the VMix session and see how we put all of this together. So inside of VMix, I'll just sort of go through the assets we have. I set up whole sets of sort of vertical video that I have coming in. So, I have 5 videos of people and I have 2 of applications, just, to have some variety here. But the way I'm handling this is I'm saying I want to use a mix. So in VMix, you can come down here and say, I want to, let me go here. I want to add a mix as an input. And all a mix is basically it lets you take a video and dynamically assign, just like you would in a regular switcher, like you do to have your preview in your program. It lets us do that. And this just gives us a lot of flexibility for how we are working with putting guests up on the projector. So if you wanted to just easily switch between guests, you can do that and sort of do nice fades and everything else. So as opposed to plugging the guest video directly into the screen in the virtual set, we're actually plugging a mix in, and that gives us that flexibility there. We also have the talent video, and for this, it's just a looping video. So let me sort of put this up here. And what we've done in this is we've taken and we've done the color key, we've set, the chroma key levels and the key filter, and we've also done the anti-aliasing, so we tried to smooth it out. But that is basically just giving us this color key. And there are actually 2 videos in here, so if I turn the color key off, I have the crop in. There's another video over here of another pose for the person, but this is it. So we have these 2, the 2 videos, one cropped and pointed to one talent using the chroma key. So that's what we have there. And then I mentioned about the projector lights. So that's what we have here. And that's those waving lights that we have. And then if you look down here, we actually have the two sets sitting here. So the first set is, as I mentioned, that doesn't have the glowing light, and the second set does. So that's the two that we talked about before. And that is sort of all of the key elements. But one of the other things, if you saw how I brought the guest on or off into this, we also have masks that we are using. So masks traditionally inside, most of these apps, you think of them as a black and white static image. But you can also have masks that are video. It doesn't care. VMix works with both. So in order to give that illusion where after you put the lights up, I have that guest sort of fold into the screen where they come on, we're using a mask with these guests. And so the two masks that we have, so let me sort of slide down here for this, we right here, so sort of select this, and if I play this, you'll see what happens. It starts out where nothing is on, and then it turns full white, and it does that with that sort of crossfade. And then we have the same for the on to off mask where it starts out white, and then, I didn't put that up there. So it will start out white, and then it fades into black. So that's how you pull guest off. How are we doing that? If you remember, I said we go back to adding a mix to the projector. That's where we're actually going in and applying the masks. So if you look here in this mix, which is going out, I actually have this mask sitting here. And the masks that I'm using, this is where I have mix 2. The next or actually mix 3 in this case, even though it's 0, 1, 2. This is the second piece. What I'm telling the system to do is to say, which mask am I using for the video? Am I using the bring a guest on mask or the bring a guest off mask? And that's what I have here in this mix sitting over here. So this gives me that ability now to say, if I want to bring the guest on, apply the going on mask. So it goes from black to white through that transformation, or bringing them off, it goes from white, which is fully visible, to black, which is fully hidden. So I'm switching that. So I'm using one mix that has a mask on it that is being fed, that mask is being fed in by a second mix. So that now you start to see that this gives me a lot of flexibility when I do it this way. So the other piece that you'll notice, which I haven't pointed out yet, is I have another mask here called a projector light mask. And all that does is it softens the edges all around the mask. So in addition to, in this projector feed, in addition to having the mask sitting here where I have, I'm taking this feed, if you actually look at the mask that I'm putting out, there is a layer in here. And so I added another layer. So the edge of the mask always has this sort of soft, squarish edge to it, which again helps to make it more believable. Like it isn't like a hard, solid edge. Because even if you have some level of transparency or translucency on that, that still doesn't feel natural. So putting this soft edge around it gives you that ability. So that's another element in here. So in both cases now, I'm using this mix with a soft edge around it to select the mask, and that pushes through. So every mask I put out, whether it's on screen or off screen, keeps that soft edge where there's never any video. So that's another element that we have stacked into this that adds to the believability. But, and let me just say, since we are in here, I will just sort of show this here. This is the 3D model that we have. That we use for that. Maybe let me switch it over and see if we can make it full screen just so you can see it here. So if you look at this, this is just, different layers that we have, the different lights that we put in. You can see there that little yellow bar across there is it's a linear light that we put there. It has a lens layer applied. So when we render this to the camera view, you get all those different elements. So we either turn things on or off that we don't want when we render it. But that's the only way that is. So nothing special, but that was just the set we put together there. All right. So how do we assemble all this stuff though? So like we have all of these different elements here, but how do we make it work? Well, for that, we're going to use a little bit of scripting. Nothing terribly technical, but this just makes it work a lot better for us. So I actually, let me see, I'll go over and show the scripts over here. So here we go. So we have a projector on script and a projector off script, which is basically what controls how the images go on and off screen. So the way it works is I actually have that mix 2. So the way VMix works, and I'll mix 1, which is the standard mix, in all of the code is listed as mix 0. It's the default one. And then when I added the 2 mixes, one for what guest is shown and one for what mask is used, that becomes mix 1 and mix 2. Just so we're clear, it's sort of 0 referenced and then 0, 1, 2. So in mix 2, this is what we're using to say what mask do I want to apply. And so in this case, what I'm telling it is I'm saying, okay, in your preview input, in your active input, I want you to assign the mask that I want to use, which in this case is mask 14, which is the off to on mask. I tell it to sleep for 100 milliseconds, and that just gives the mask a chance to load, so there's no sort of mix-up in this. And then what I do is I say, let's put preview input 12. And so preview input for input 12, that's the virtual set with the glowing bottom on it. So we line that up to make sure that's in place. And then again, I give it 100 milliseconds to make sure that's there. I start the video playing on input 14. So input 14 is that transition, is that mask that we're using for the on and off transitions. And because it has a lag, there's a certain time where it stays off. I start it playing, wait 120 milliseconds, and then fade in. So this is all done with a script. So it's sort of timed out to give you that look where it moves on, the thing lights up, the projector lines show up, and then the guest fades in. And that's basically how we're handling all of that. For the reverse is, now we have to do things a little differently here. So I will select the input 15 on mix 2, which is the output, like how do I want to dissolve the guest on screen. I wait again, and then I start that playing because you want to see the guest dissolve fully while you're still on screen before you fade out. So that gives you that full guest dissolve when I start that play. And I basically, as soon as I start that playing, I cut right over to in mix 2 to say start the dissolve on screen. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying get my preview input to 11, which is the set without the lights. So now I'm all set for that. And I say now wait 2 seconds because I want to give that chance, the video a chance to totally fade off screen, and then we swap over. So that gives you sort of the pacing and timing for all of that. And that was, really how we made that work. So even though this is sort of just an element, a simple element inside your set, you have this timing of everything, give it sort of a dynamic life where you feel these things are happening, not just pop on and pop off. And that we wanted to do in doing this something that had some level of realism. So that was really all the things for controlling that element on the set. And then the other thing we had is we had another little script that basically lets you switch which guest video you wanted to put in there. So this, that's just down here. We put a standard preview input in mix 1, and that's the feed which has which guest is being shown. I let it sleep for 500 milliseconds, and then we just fade into it. So that just gives us an easy way, if I say I want to go to guest 2, to just fade between guest in that projector. So let me just show you how that would look. So let me go back to sort of the VMix output here. And so if I go and say, well, we'll start with, get over here, we'll start with our first guest here. So you see we bring on the guest, and then I just have shortcut keys set for each one of the different guests that I can come in, which will go and let me do this sort of simple transition. I also could put up, any type of, phone app or something like that. And this now just gives me basically a virtual switcher in here to say, who do I want to show in there? And, when we're done, we can just click it off. And you can see that timing where we give it the chance to disappear, show just the video behind it. And that transition out makes it look, again, more believable, like it's shutting down, it's dropping the guest and then shutting down. So that was part of what we were looking to do with that. So that's sort of the overview of everything we wanted to do here. And I mean, I think you shouldn't look at this as sort of like an aesthetic choice. What I was really trying to do with this session was give you some ideas for how you can use and combine the different elements inside of VMix to do some more creative things. So if I had more time, I could have used, as opposed to just having the lens flare sort of sit there, I could have had it come in and then go out and had more layers. And there's lots of other things I could have added to this if I were doing this as sort of an ongoing element in a production I'd be using. So clearly there's things I could do to make that look a bit better than what we showed here. But the key point is that there are a lot of different elements inside of VMix that give you that capability. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you add elements to different virtual sets, I mean, I set them up as 2 virtual sets with different backgrounds. I could have done this where I used another mix inside of VMix for the background. And I could have said, okay, I want the background to be a dynamic element. If you remember, you could sort of say, is this dynamic or not? If I set that to true, I'd be able to switch that. I could have added another mix and just had 2 solid images there and done combinations that way. So different ways to do this, but all these elements are available to you. And especially if you're doing smaller virtual sets, there may be things you want to do where if you're doing a product demo and you want it to have like a little pop-up of this is the product here. Things you could do with that, especially if you have things which could render 3D. So, if you had the ability to say, gee, I could actually do something like with a web page that I put in there with chroma keyed out a green background, and I could actually use HTML or JavaScript to rotate an object in 3D space. So all those things are there. So lots of different interesting ways that you can use this approach to do something that will probably look a lot better than what I put together here, but something that would work for you. So before we wrap up, let me go back to the comments because I think we have a few more here. Is there a top limit to resolution as well? So the quick answer, Michael, is right now it's 65,000 by 65,000, which is way more than anything that most people would use. When you render it out, though, so the map, the UV map, is a graphical element. So the maximum resolution will be the maximum resolution of the graphical element that you render. So sort of to do that mapping. And to a large extent, that will really depend on the actual like recording or delivery resolution. So if you're doing something in 8K, and that's sort of your recording resolution, you're future-proofing everything, you have that 65,000, but if you render it out at 8K, you'll know that you'll always be the exact same resolution as the recording. So you're not going to lose quality. One of the things to keep in mind, though, and you can do this especially with things like virtual sets, is you may want to render it out at much higher resolution because you may want to zoom in. And so if you took and had a virtual set and I wanted to like go from a full shot and zoom into a desk where it may be just me sitting there with a smaller, closer headshot, that gradient is staying fixed. So if you want to zoom in on that and keep the resolution, you should think about what visible resolution is that going to have on screen at my most zoomed in point. And that will let you know that you're doing it, you're mapping it without introducing any loss into the quality. So hopefully that helps there. So let's see. So Experts Who Agency, welcome from John Drinkwater. John, good to have you here always. So let's see. Obsessive Audio, thank you for sharing that. We definitely try, and we know there's a huge interest in VMix, and there are a lot of elements that go around VMix as well. So we want to make sure we cover that. And as I've mentioned, we are spending some time because we've had people asking about TriCaster, but I am glad that you find what we do here useful. So thank you, Obsessive. Let's see. Moses Akaiwana, hopefully I said your name correctly. Hello back to you. Thank you for joining us here. Let's see. So automation from VMix. So he's saying hello from Vargada, Sweden. Hopefully I said that correctly. It is late on a Friday night. So as I always mention, I am so appreciative that people give it their Friday night to watch this. So thank you, automation. And Tommy Willis is saying hello from Alabama, home state of the world-renowned Tom Sinclair. Absolutely. So, anytime I get to say something good about Tom is not enough. He's a great guy, and if you don't know Tom, definitely check him out on Streaming Idiots. Check him out at Eastern Shore Broadcasting. Really great guy. And Tommy, thank you for saying hi and calling him out. I appreciate it. So Peter, this is Peter from Germany. He said, I use this a lot in the Corona lockdown. He had pictures of our venue with big screens and brought the people together in the Forbidden Room. We have 3 110-inch screens and use 3 UV maps for that. Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of different things. And as you think through things, especially if you think through things sequentially, you could have something, for instance, where you could have a flat wall, which could have your 110-inch monitor hidden, then just have sort of panels go down and hide behind the other wall and display the guest. So you could do these types of things now. And so the sets themselves could become, like, the title here is a bit more dynamic. And I think that, but Peter's point here is really important, where he's saying it was emotionally very helpful for the people to come together, in a different way. And I think that is really true. Anything you can do that, especially in the event space, anything you can do that makes the people feel more present, more involved, I think is really valuable. So, sort of taking off where Peter's comment here, one of the things you could do with a UV map is you could take, say you had like a wall of video coming in from a third-party application where you just had, multiple videos tiled together. You could actually use a gradient to cut those up and put them all in individual spaces. So you could create sort of a desk or a round table with different people. So you could go out to that space where you showed everybody sort of sitting around a table and then zoom into individuals. Again, things you can do to sort of cement that bond with the people that you're trying to support in an event and trying to communicate with. All right, so let's see. We have Michael Mussington. Michael, thank you. I welcome all the alchemists we have in this community. It's really an honor, for me to have you spend time with us. So thank you. So Spatial Optic is scripting, loving it. So, yep, we will get to more complex scripting this season, I do promise, but I definitely wanted to get back to sort of show how all these things combine. And I'm a big scripting lover. So, So Ryocaster, he says he just arrived, but he'll make sure to watch the whole show later. Ryo, thank you. Definitely appreciate this. So he says, can you rotate the preview of the vertical videos in your VMix shots? So the quick answer is yes, but if you put this in, so let me give you an example. So if we were using this with live to air, you have the 16 by 9. What I would do with the UV map is I would do a crop on the sides to sort of make it a 9 by 16, and then just expand I use that as the image that I place. So inside of my UV map, I do that cropping. I don't have to do it in live to air or in VMix Call or anything else I'm taking that video from. I do the cropping with the UV map, size that to fit where I wanted it, and that will take care of that automatically. So the video itself doesn't need to be side rotated. Where this is great is if somebody is using a 4K camera, it's great that way. Also, if you want to do this for other things where you have studio talent, you can take your camera and turn it sideways, so you actually have the 1920 there, or the 4K coming in the vertical as opposed to the horizontal. So you lose no real resolution. But if you're shrinking these down and putting them in, a 1080 or a 4K production, it probably isn't going to matter. You probably have plenty of resolution, so you're not going to show anything lossy. But yes, you can do rotations, and you can do flips. So if you had somebody whose phone was coming in upside down, where you can just rotate in VMix too and just turn it around. So that's baked into the basic. Actually, let me show, since we're talking about this. Let me just show you what this would look like. So in this video here, I believe this came in and it was incorrectly laid out. So if I go into position, you can see in main, I have this little rotate here. And so this will let me flip the video around. So I can set it up for sort of any sort of 90-degree rotation to line that up. So that should give you the ability to even handle people who may have a phone call coming in that's right. And you could do that as a shortcut as well. Just pump it in and rotate it. So if somebody's coming in before you put them on air, just push a button and flip it. So, and you notice that is different from just flipping it, because things aren't reverse left to right in that. So you're doing the rotation. So it's a truly correct orientation for the image. So if they held up text, it would look like regular text. You wouldn't see it mirrored. So do you know a way to fake perspective on virtual sets? I mean, VMix really doesn't render 3D, so it lacks perspective views and shots. So the only thing, I mean, if you look at what we did here, so let me sort of jump back here and see if I can put something up here. So here, let me zoom into this full screen here, and what you have is this going back. So there is a bit of depth coming in here, where this is sort of looks like it's heading in toward the screen in alignment with the angle here. So there isn't really a way to do it with individual elements. I mean, so you get the sense of it's going back in depth, but you can do it with the way you design those elements. So, the 3D model gave me that sense of depth. The way you layer things, where you stack them one behind the other, that gives you, again, a sense of depth. So the light here appears to be behind the video that's being projected. So you get that sense as well. But a lot of it has to deal with, what you can do to sort of fake these rotations in the graphic elements that you use. So that's really, there isn't a better way in most of these. These are really, they call them sort of, 2.5D, where you get sort of the ability to layer stack, but you don't really have a third dimension to do orientation. So that would be the best way to do that. So clearly there are, true 3D, virtual set, programs that hopefully I'm looking to see if we can get something set up with that. But you know, that would certainly give you the ability to do exactly what you're talking about there. So, okay, so let's see. So we have Bakary Sané. So hopefully I said your name right, Bakary. I am watching from the Gambia in West Africa. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. It's humbling to think there are people around the world spending their time watching us. So thank you. So let's see. So Bakery's also saying, is there a way to record a clean feed when using VMix? Yes, actually. So let me switch back to the VMix screen over here. And when you look at the way VMix is set up, you set up different outputs. And so if we go here, you can pick the outputs that you want here, but you can also say down here, do I want to have overlays on these first two outputs? So you can turn around and say, I want all of the overlays on, or I want all of them off, or just certain ones on. So this would be like in your output one, you could record a feed with all of the overlays. But in output two, you could do that with none of the overlays or only specific ones or totally different ones. So say you were dealing with multiple languages where you had one feed you wanted, which could have overlays in, you know, lower thirds and everything in one language and the other in another. You know, you'd have that ability to say, I can now have output one with one audio feed and one set of overlays in output two with another audio feed and another set of overlays. Or, as you mentioned, a clean feed with none at all. So that's how you'd set that up. Okay, so what else do we have? Tom is saying, Tommy, the check is in the mail. So yes, Tom, you don't need to send out checks. I think there's an army of people who would give you a testimonial for, you know, how good you are to work with. So thank you. It's very funny there. So Marco was saying, it looks like I'm going to be procrastinating next week, playing around with virtual sets. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once you get into it, there's a lot you start to want to do, but it is amazing, you know, what's available now, you know, with, you know, a tool just like VMix, where you are dealing with sort of these, you know, 2.5D layered sets, you know, never mind any of the ones that are using more 3D rendering engines. So let's see. Well, Tom, thank you. Likes are always appreciated. So I appreciate that, Tom. Thanks. So Ryo, happy, you know, if any of that helps, you know, please use it and share it. That's sort of our mantra here. Just we want to build a community where we, you know, learn as much and teach as much as possible. All right, so this probably ran a bit past what we were going to talk about, but why don't we give the main show a wrap, and we'll go to our post-show hangout, and we can talk more about this, about anything you like. Any callers are welcome. So why don't we do that? If you can't join us, we will see you next week. If you can, we'll see you in a few. Take care. All right, we are back. So Michael is asking, good places to get more realistic backgrounds. So the first one, and I mean this is in all sincerity, is you can get backgrounds in, you know, as stock photos that are actual photos of sets or other elements that you want. So that is something to consider. Uh, so I know uh, Eric Pratt, I believe, has virtual set works. I'm sorry, there are different 3D uh, uh, virtual set studios, and I don't want to get the names wrong, but Eric Pratt is somebody else who has a range of sets that are available. But I mean, if you're looking for different virtual sets, I would definitely go online and search for this, but really be very critical of what you're doing, of what you're seeing, and here's a piece that I'll sort of give you an opinion on this. I think what people do typically is they build sets that become unbelievable. They're like multiple stories with flashing lights and all this stuff. I think the sets that tend to work the best, especially if you're not in sort of a full 3D rendered space, the sets that work the best are going to be ones that look like they could be real in your space, but have customer branding and other aspects to them. So sometimes those don't need to have hyper complex elements, but you can still get very, very realistic elements. The other thing is to look at tools like Blender, which is free for 3D modeling, where you could basically get your own textures, build your own models, do your own lighting, and render those sets. And that's something that you could keep common elements, but render, specific pieces for different client outings or for different things you may want to do. So, sorry if that doesn't give you a sort of a specific list, but I think in doing this, it is probably a good mindset to go in to say, big piece of realism is the believability of the set itself in space. This is something that people would actually have, because that will help make it much more believable. And I've seen some excellent sets used in small sports productions where it looks like they are in a real set, where they just have a green screen over a desk they build in front of them, and a backdrop. So it's not a lot of elements, but definitely, can make it very realistic looking. Oh, well, cheers back, Obsessive Audio. So in doing this, Michael's saying, is mainly good lighting. Yeah, I agree. You getting a good green screen is the first, is the first element. If you don't have a believable chroma key, then you're not going to have a believable virtual set. So things to consider are sets fall apart at hairlines always. So the what you'll often see is the hair almost looks like mine. It has that sort of very buzzed crop look. This is my real hair, but when you are trying to get a green screen, you'll find that the little hair elements that may sit up become like little blotches or gray speckles that you'll have, and that sort of breaks the reality of it. So definitely is something there. The other thing, based on how essential this is Blackmagic has a set of, I think it's called their Chromat. No, it's not Chromat. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but they have a set of virtual set products that actually do keying and let you inject things in layers and do realistic shadows and reflections and things. And they actually start at some reasonable price points, but that would be something else. If you are going to be looking at virtual sets as one of the key elements in your studio production, getting some hardware that can help with dialing in that key and making it more believable, I think that would be something to consider. And I think they run everywhere from like $500 for the lowest end up to about $3,000 for the highest end. But again, as production tools, you would invest in that. You'd invest that much in a PC for certain things. And so if you can, consider, that as another alternative, you may get a much better key, which gives you a much more believable look. The other thing is also just having, a bit of the bokeh that you have, where you have a slight amount of blur in it, because that can make the set more believable as well, and also hide some of the imperfections. So it just by softening it, and it doesn't have to be as much as this. I mean, this is probably more than most people would use, but you can get that, that separation and that more believable look if you have that. The key though is the bokeh needs to be real. Like, you can't have a wall that's sort of coming up towards you be blurry in the front the same as it is in the back, because that will kill it. But that, by the way, is another thing you can do with masks. Now, you could actually have a picture that is unblurred and a picture that is blurred for that background, and then for the parts of the picture that may be coming up, you just do a gradient where it goes from unblurred to from blurred to unblurred as you go back, and that again could add even more believability. So different ways to do this with. So experts through agency, John Drinkwater is saying he looks at Adobe Substance Designer, and you can build sets there. Yes, there are others. That's another, like, there's a whole 3D modeling set inside of Adobe that will give you options for doing all different types of composited 3D elements to build into a set. So I haven't actually used it myself, so I don't have a direct comment on rendering quality or any of that. But John definitely has been doing a lot in this space. So if he refers to it, I would definitely take a look at it. So Obsessive Voice is saying he's had some luck using AI image generation to help design sets. Yeah, I mean, that's another topic we will pick up and talk about this season. But the role of AI in a lot of what we do is definitely going to impact not just how we do things, but what we're able to take on. But I still think the key for anything we do with AI is, how do we create something that reflects our own artistic view? So what I like about a lot of the AI products that I'm seeing is that they let you iterate, where you can do a description and it will come out, and then you can sort of further refine that with your own input. So it would be very much like working with an artist trying to execute a vision you have. So even if you don't have the direct artistic skill to do certain things, AI is going to make that possible. But I think the best use of AI is when it becomes a collaborator with you, as opposed to a substitute for, things that you would otherwise, do and put creative energy into. So, yes. Oh, so it's the all new Ultimatte 12. Yeah, that is. Thank you, John, for calling that. That was what I was thinking. Chromat. I knew the matte. Couldn't get the Ultimatte. So yeah, the Ultimatte 12. John is right. It is much more than a keyer. I mean, it has layering. It has things to work with shadows. Has things to work with color. So a lot of different elements in that. So definitely a very cool product for somebody who is going to base their production space around sort of a virtual set with Chroma Key. But it does a lot more. So Obsessive Voice saying Blender is pretty good at simulating depth of field. So yes, you can get that. A lot of these things, when you sort of set the camera parameters in so Blender is a 3D rendering program. So you typically, the way they work is you have a model, sort of a 3D model, textured surface, lighting, which casts shadows. Then you have cameras and all the attributes of the cameras. and each one of the lights have attributes for what type of light, does it work with physics or not? So all of these things are in there. So simulating depth of field would probably be something inside the camera where you can pick a lens and whether it's supposed to do realistic depth of field based on the lens and virtual sensor that you have associated with it. So the Ultimat Mini Unique, this is John talking again, and the Ultimat 12 with HDMI connections, they get you really an advanced keyer. I agree, but the high end ones do even more than that, and can do things like totally remove background. So if you have objects that you can't get out, like a light pole or something, you could tell it to remember this background, and anything you see in this now with nobody in it, get rid of when you actually start keying. So you can do pretty cool things. But yeah, the point is it really does start at, for if you're using this in a professional context, fairly reasonable pricing. Like I said, some $500 up to like $3,000. So again, that's, that is so much better than where this used to be. I mean, I will tell you, Ultimat used to cost over $10,000, and that was just the start of your investment. You needed hardware panels to control it and other things. So now I think they are definitely looking further down in the market for some of the things that you can, for parts of the community that haven't been served by them before. And that's something Blackmagic has been great with. They really have taken very high-end products and made them available to a much broader range of content creators. So Bakri is asking, can the V Mars cam track work with VMix when using virtual in it? So as far as I know, so the answer is no. The V Mars track cam it's a device that you put on top of your camera when you're filming, and it will then know where this camera is in space. And that means that you can do things like I can move around, and when I rotate or push in, the background knows exactly where the camera is and adjusts the video behind it. So that's not something that VMix has. It's really meant for the 3D rendering environments, things like Ximetry or zero density, that are using a true gaming engine to render them. So that's where it's really designed for. But again, I believe that's probably like a $5,000 US. I don't know what it costs in the global market, but it does incredible things. But there are other ways that are out there, and I've actually seen some things that actually use the iPhone as a tracking device. So you would be able to use that to say where exactly is my camera pointing and where is it positioned. And they use almost like one of the apps, I don't know exactly the name, but it uses almost like a QR code that sort of sits in different positions that you're going to capture. And based on the shape and the dimensions, sort of the rotational dimensions, it feeds that, your iPhone picks that up and can feed that data out to an application that they've written that will feed these sets to do that sort of virtual 3D camera movement. So there are other things that are probably going to be much cheaper as well. So Michael, so yeah, I mean, Michael, hopefully that is useful when you think about putting virtual sets together. That is me making an aesthetic opinion. There could be other people with very, very different opinions here. So take that for what it's worth with this. But thank you. Okay, so let's see. So Ryan was asking, are the codes available in GitHub? We will put all this up after the show, so probably up later tonight. But we'll put the VMix session with all the scripting and the virtual sets all up there. So you will have all of that tonight. So Obsessive Audio is saying he experimented a bit with doing virtual sets in Unreal Engine, but it needs a ton of GPU power. Yes, that's Unreal and any of this, because I think both Xsymmetry and Zero Density use Unreal. You need basically very high-end GPUs. And for a lot of these, you need to unlock the multi-GPU modes, which usually come at a higher price for the software. So, but that is something this will, more than anything, it's going to suck up GPU power. So I would say like the RTX A4000, unless you're doing things that are very simple, that would be my starting point for putting something together for that. And again, that's not going to be able to handle, a dozen embedded objects. You're going to have a limited number of objects in your environment that you can work with. But that said, you can create incredibly believable visuals with that, including things where you have depth of field and other elements that happen automatically, along with reflections and shadows and other things. So really cool stuff in this, but it does require processing. So yeah, Unreal Engine also does, the iPhone tracking. And yeah, so I think one of the keys with anything you do for tracking, if you want true realism, is that it has to be 100% accurate. I mean, it could have some slight margin, but it can't look like the background is catching up with you, where you are doing you're doing a camera move and the background, it's moving on you, but the background's sort of dragging slightly behind you. That's not something that, you'd want. So that's both a processing power, but also a sensitivity. So if the gyroscope is completely accurate, that's something you could definitely use. But again, they need to sync up. So I actually am told John Drinkwater is looking to join us. So, John, are you there?
I'm here.
So, how are you? Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you after so long as well.
So every time I talk to you, you're continuously upping your game. It's like you have a talent for this or something. So talk to me. What have you been doing?
I'd call it more a hunger. I'm worried about the people behind me. Just, they're coming. I've got to keep going. What's next?
Absolutely. So
It's just great fun, isn't it? I don't think I've worked a day in my life. I've played with computers for 40-something years. I don't think I've done a day of work in my life.
So it's one of those things. Yeah, and I think anybody that's in the creative space, whether it's technically creative or artistically creative, but I really see them as a combination. I think there's a group of us that sort of straddle both those worlds. That it is incredibly satisfying. The sense of completing something and being like, oh, I like that. That worked well. Or, running a production and at the end of it saying, wow, that was great how that came together. It is incredibly rewarding.
Yes, and I still don't think people get it. And I mean people in our industry don't get it. COVID has completely transformed this industry. And people haven't realized yet to the degree it has. Before COVID, it was ridiculously difficult to get the average person in the street to watch a webinar, to watch an online presentation. Now, they go, oh yeah, Zoom. And they have an expectation of what they're going to see. And that doesn't put them off, but it does give you the chance, if you use some of this clever stuff, to just blow their minds, because they're used to a boring Zoom. I have purposefully left my camera in a boring state here because I wanted to show the difference between you and me. I have just turned my webcam on in my office. I haven't worked out what screens are on and what's going on behind me. You are in a completely well-produced environment. you've got great backdrops, you've got blurring, you've got great lighting. And I can copy you in about 4 or 5 minutes by just bringing in the right lights and getting rid of some of the tap behind me. But the fact is, I haven't, because this is what an average person would do. And you are a good example of what a professional person would do given the time. And you can make your green screen thing is great, because one of the simplest tricks I've used for green screen is I've looked at my desk and I'm going to show things on my desk. And I'm embarrassed by my desk. It doesn't look impressive. You just get a piece of green cloth. You can get them off eBay for just a few dollars, can't you? Lay it over the desk, color key it out, put something else more important, more impressive in front of it as a picture of it, and suddenly you've got a new desk.
Yep.
And it costs you $10.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's baked into VMix, so it's not like you have to sit there and go, there's another layer of investment, and it's not CPU intensive. For the most part, you can do it with sort of a modest system. Talking about the monster systems you need for Unreal or any of those. But I also think it's you had a very good point where you want to exceed people's expectation, because that's the way where they sit there and go, wow, now I'm going to pay more attention. And it also helps because, it establishes authority. And I mean that not, it makes what you say carry more weight, because people feel if you are investing in looking professional, in producing something that has more character to it, what you say must be more important too. And I think
Definitely,
especially when you're working with clients, that matters. You are an agent for that client, and the client isn't live streaming because they like live streaming. That may be why we do it. They're doing it because they want an end result. So you want to do everything you can to help them achieve that result, and to create that connection, whether it's around messaging, engagement, just awareness, education, any of those things. You want to be able to enhance that. And that starts by grabbing the person that's watching and keeping them engaged. If you don't do that, it's like, yeah, I'm on my phone and I'm looking up and I'm on mute and my camera is off. And you want them to not even think about that anymore. It's like, I'm a part of this. I'm invested in it.
yeah. It's like the old thing about teaching a piano or teaching a musical instrument. If you're going to teach somebody who's grade 1, you don't need to be grade 8. You need to be grade 2 or 3. And it's the same with this technology. You only need to be 1 or 2 grades better than the people you want to work for, and they will want you. The lower thirds responses from YouTube, that's not very difficult to do, but it takes a certain level of expertise to set it up and a certain level of technology to be able to use it. And when you do, again, it blows the minds of other people, especially when we're talking about interaction. And I think the most important thing that you said today was that interaction with your audience is what the 3D starts to psychologically bring, because you stop being a flat television and you start becoming a 3D space. And if you can, with a bit of wizardry, and of course, those people that don't know what they're doing, oh gosh, I hope nobody's listening to this who has done this. And I expect they are now thinking about it. I'm regretting already, but I will say it. In the first days of Zoom, we thought we were really clever, because what we would do is we would get the Zoom chat on a laptop and we would put it on a screen, and then we put the screen behind us, or so it's in view, so we could say, and you look at the chat and you say, oh, Bob's just said welcome. Eric's here from New Zealand. And everybody thought it was really clever. And of course, those people that know how a 3D space works start thinking, that's not very clever, that's very clunky. What I'll do is I'll do the same thing, but I'll use a 3D environment and I'll put a virtual 3D image of that chat on the screen. And suddenly you've gone beyond the level of buying another laptop and just putting another thing together. You've taken it to the other view, but you've brought people into the experience. And again, they did it with Zoom, didn't they? A lot of these people that have been doing webinars for dozens of years who don't have the expertise of TV production, they again got great big televisions. And I know our friend who's got 110 millimeter TVs, he did this, I'm sure. They got big televisions, they got their another laptop, because they like buying laptops when they're using Zoom. So they buy this other laptop, they connect it up, and they have a gallery view. And they have another screen over here with another gallery view. And it looks quite impressive to people, but actually you don't need to buy 110 millimeter screens to do it. You just use the VMix layout, don't you? You can just lay those video feeds onto your screen. And the trick that I use is I have a cheaper and smaller screen in the same place, so that I can see the people. Because obviously I can't see the 3D space, but I can see the people, but then I use the 3D effect to overlay over that screen with a bigger, more flashier screen, so people don't realize I've got a cheap 32-inch screen and they've got this great big 4-foot display behind me of all the people's chat or messages or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you also have the ability when you think of creating this to not just think of the cameras coming at you this way. I could easily have a camera if I had, a set design for it, which came from behind me, and I am in front of a green screen this way, and that can just be cut out and these are a wall of people, and I'm switching between them, and so you create another level where we tend, when we think of virtual sets, to think of them face on. But when you think of the way you would actually switch in a real studio, you have your over-the-shoulder interview model where it's like you're looking over my shoulder at the person, then you're looking over their shoulder at me as you have a conversation. So that's sort of standard like filmmaking etiquette. That's how you would do that. And so creating that again is another element of realism where it isn't just that I have something different but still the same perspective. I can actually start to think now of perspectives in all of these. And like you said, you can have that little screen sitting there and make it look like a big screen. And that's fine. I mean, you can just garbage mat that out and put it in. I mean, you could even do that. Like if you have a shot over your head, you could have a TV at the very top that you garbage mat out, and the green screen can be all behind that. So you can turn around and say there's different ways to do this that let you look and make that sort of eye contact, but still, have effectively a fully virtual, larger studio to work out of.
Yeah, and the first people to do that were the weather people, weren't they? Doing the weather reports. They have a green screen to their side, and they would have a screen ahead of them so they could see what they were looking at, and then they would know where to put their arms for the green screen because they had already see themselves in the composite coming through from the camera.
So yeah, and I think all of this is really, it's, and that's why I said you want to do something that's believable too. If you are doing something for a client and suddenly you have like all these glass columns with reflection, it's sort of like people are gonna be like, yeah, you were abducted by aliens. You weren't really in a TV studio. So I think sometimes using sort of the tasteful restraint in putting together something to say, if I were building this as a set that I'd be using for this type of production, what would that look like? And then replicate that, as opposed to sort of pretending you're, spent, 2 million quid on a flashy new, three-story television studio, which, wouldn't match with expectations.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is do one simple thing and don't get carried away with this, because you can get carried away very quickly. And yes, I am very much considering getting that Blackmagic device.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I know them from the past. I mean, they've done some incredible things. So.
Yeah, and even though Zoom on the lowest powered laptop does a green screen sort of removal, you can see, as you say, you can see the edges. You can see where the processor just isn't powerful enough to process that. And to hand that job over to a piece of hardware for me is a really good benefit, because it gets rid of that issue, and it makes it easier then for VMix, doesn't it, to process it, because it's got nice clean feeds.
Yep, you can potentially save money on the VMix hardware by having the right outboard hardware to go with it. All right, John.
So the challenge is for everybody to come up with some great 3D examples before next week to show you how wonderful they are.
I would love that. I have to come up with a show topic before next week, so I have a reason to come back on air. So, John, thank you very much. I appreciate you calling into the show.
Thanks very much for being.
Cheers.
So wonderful. Thank you.
Bye. All right. So, John, thank you for joining us. I definitely appreciate that. So I know there's been some more comments, so I don't want everybody to think we're ignoring you here. So Michael's just saying that good thing NVIDIA card prices have gone down and NVIDIA's opened up, the unlocking of engines. Yeah, I mean, I think we're now at 5 unlocks that you can have for encoding and unlimited decode. So yeah, still NVIDIA owns the space in terms of things that are, there are Matrox and other stuff, but those are custom and very expensive hardware. So let's say, so John is saying you use Vive to feed camera position into a computer with a 3D rendering system, then have that system output a video image that you feed into VMix as a virtual background. Yes. So John, you are 100%. I took the question before as, can you use it with VMix sets? But yes, you are simply using VMix as a switcher, and it can do this with anything. So I appreciate you pointing it out, John, because I probably wasn't very clear with what I was talking about there. So absolutely. Spatial is saying start with a Lenovo P7 or PX. The new line of PCs is the minimum for professional production. So yeah, I mean, I think if anybody has questions about specific hardware or anything else they'd like to use for doing different things in productions, just post it in the group. There's a lot of smart people in this community that can give you firsthand experience, which I always prefer. I'd love to get feedback from somebody I trust that isn't just shilling for somebody to sell something. So Gary's saying, thanks for another great show, John. Always enlightening. Gary, I appreciate you, and you've been a long time part of this community, so I am grateful for that. So Marco's saying, thanks for the show. See you all next week. He has to run. Marco, you are probably gone by now, but I appreciate you dropping in here and spending time with us. Thank you. Spatial says he agrees 1,000% that he cringes at his broadcast before 2023. I think we all look back at what we did in the past, and so I mean I'll tell you now that probably 3 or 4 years from now we'll look back at what we're doing now and go, ooh, can I take that down? I don't like that, but that means we're growing, so that's always a good thing. So, Michael, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great evening as well. All right. So we covered a lot of ground today, and I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. This was a lot of fun putting together. And Obsessive, thank you. We are always grateful that you join us and that you keep the conversation going. I value the conversation as much as anything else we do on Streaming Alchemy. So thank you for that. So John, thank you. I appreciate you joining us. All right then, everyone. This was a lot of fun, and like I said, I'm going to have to think of a show for next week, but we'll have something together by then, and hopefully I'll get to see all of you again next week. Until then, be well, be safe. Take care.